Hey YouTube, who has two thumbs and is sick of Williams System 3 through 7 boards? This guy. After going through that System 4 MPU and getting it running on the bench, I realized that in my parts pile, I also had two driver boards that were both incomplete, but between the two, I could actually make an attempt at getting one of them back in service. So kind of trying to figure out which one would be best to bring back. Again, they were missing parts, but they were missing different parts. This one had a few more parts missing than this one, but then this one had one PIA missing and then two Motorola PIAs there. And this is a little bit of foreshadowing, but this one actually had three AMI brand ones. And this board had fewer parts to replace, but not much. You can kind of tell which ones I've done. There was a couple transistors that were broken off, these tip 102s, and then the what are they, 4401s in front. A couple of those were missing, and then I think I had two transistors in the lamp matrix, and then these chips were missing, so they were socketed, and then these two were missing, so I just grabbed those off of this board and plugged them in. And kind of figure out which one would be better to build. I even though this one had AMI chips on it, I was looking kind of at the back side of this one, and I don't know if I'll be able to capture it in the video, but this one kind of had some funky rework where some old components were replaced, but were kind of charred up a little bit. So I thought that this one kind of had better bones and wasn't hacked up so much on the back. So just kind of did the minimal stuff to it. This one actually needed the 40-pin female connector replaced. And the way that you can kind of tell if it absolutely needs it, but here's some of the old clips. The way that they're sitting in here, the male pins get inserted above. I'm going to try and get that to focus. They get inserted above between the metal pin and the plastic housing. And if you shine a light from the backside, you can kind of see on these used connectors that there's a different space for each pin. So they've kind of all worn and warped differently over the years. But then a couple of these on the stock connector, you could actually look in there and the pin was completely gone. So that flexible bending part on a couple of them actually were broken off. So I wasn't even going to give that female side a chance at working on the test bench. I just went ahead and replaced it. Now, when I went through and replaced it, I'll get this parts board out of the way, connected it to MPU. Now, this is a System 7 one that I already know is working. So a good troubleshooting tip, if this is a luxury, if you know one of these is good, it's easy to test the other one. Versus if you didn't know either of them were good, then you weren't quite sure what the problem would be, especially if you had something locked up. But I connected it to a known working MPU, and then this driver board automatically locked up the LEDs and just kept them on, and then it wouldn't do anything. Wouldn't boot, wouldn't do anything. So that usually points to a problem with these PIAs. And remember, on this factory board, these have now been replaced by Motorola's, but these were all AMI brand. And I figured that those would probably give me an issue either immediately or down the road. And I wasn't too concerned about picking and choosing which one was going to be the one that was bad. And my thought process was maybe we'll start with the switch one, thinking that maybe high voltage hit a switch and it might have got through these chips and eventually back to the PIA. So I went and then I removed that and socketed it and then put it back on the MPU, and it was still locked up. So this chip was actually good. And the way that I could test that out, these are the old chips with the legs cut pretty much flush, but to save the board and sacrifice the chip, I just used the edge cutters and cut them all off there. But one kind of neat trick that I found out is I have some of these IC test clips, and these are normally, you would clip this onto a chip and then you could probe those inputs a little bit safer than doing it at the chip level. But with the little side pieces of the legs still there, this is one of the, I think this is one of the bad ones, is actually is clipped in there, and then I can stick this directly into my Neolock tester that I have in other videos, and I could actually still test this chip even though I cut the legs off flush. And then that wouldn't really help me ever save this if it was a good chip, but it would at least help me check my sanity as I'm going through here, making sure that I'm not tearing out too many good parts. But after doing this one and then testing it with this approach with this IC clip, this one was actually good. So the first one that I guessed was actually the only good one on this board. So I did have to sacrifice that, but again, it was that AMI brand, and if I didn't do it now, I'd probably have to do it some other time down the road. So tried that one first, still locked up, and I was like, well, maybe the solenoid one would do it, thinking that maybe something was damaged here. And then I took that one out and then tested it, and it actually tested bad. So I knew that one was bad. So I plugged it back in and it was still locked up. So then the only one that's left is the one that does the lamp matrix stuff. And then this one was also bad. So on this driver board that was locked up, this one was good, but then these two were bad. And they all three were AMI. And now they're all three replaced with Motorola ones. So then once I put this back on the MPU, it finally unlocked it. And then I was able to do all the tests. So all the other tests that I've done in the other videos actually worked on this. So piecing this back together, and then with these transistors that I replaced, I would also say that I would suggest you just put in new ones rather than trying to find a good used one off of the old board and just kind of save a couple heat cycles on those pads. Just replace them with new, because these transistors are pretty cheap compared to what a new board would cost. But one way that you can figure out if these PIAs are working is with Leon's test ROM. And it's not too useful when these PIAs are so bad, because like when I tested these in the Neolock, every single port was bad. So that was causing it to lock up. But if it would at least let it boot, you can see if these are good. And then the other nice thing about the Leon test ROM that I have installed here that will demonstrate is we're actually going to leave this disconnected, and then you can figure out if these PIAs are good, because it's going to sit there and blink a 0 and the lights in a cycle, and then you could probe your outputs of these PIAs to see if they're any good. So to do this, he recommends you get rid of the 12 volts on the reset and just connect, it's kind of hard to see there, but you connect the bottom of C23, capacitor 23, to the bottom of R3. And then you have to install the test ROM. This is on a 2532 ROM. And then put that into IC socket 17. And I'm just going to turn the power on, and then we'll see this Leon test ROM in action. And again, this just goes back and forth. And you can hook up a logic probe or even a digital multimeter and then see if the outputs of these are going high and low. So that's kind of in time with these. The other thing that Leon's test ROM can do for you is if you hit the lower switch here, it also alternates the blanking. But you can hit the lower switch here and it'll do a memory test. And there's 3 different memory chips on here. There's obviously the 5101 for the battery, but then there are 2 smaller, I think they're 2116s. And I can't spot them right off the top of my head, but they're on there somewhere. Or 2114s, it looks like they're over here. So when we hit this bottom test switch, it's gonna go 1, 2, 3, and it's checking those chips. And if it ever gets stuck on these, the one that it's stuck on is the chip that's bad, because it's going to try to continuously write that until it can reset itself like that. So it's nice that this would actually run without the driver board connected, because the factory software will not run without these connected. So then you can at least say, okay, this board's good. Now I'm going to attach this board. So when I was troubleshooting, I knew that this one was running the test EEPROM, but then with the power off and this reconnected, it just completely locked it up. So I knew that there was something wrong on this board, and since it has to start, or it has to initialize these before it boots, I just figured it would be a good shotgun approach just to test those out, and especially since it was that troublesome AMI brand. So I'm gonna continue rebuilding this. I got to redo the headers and the filter cap. The 40 pin's already good, but then this should be a good working spare that I can keep in the closet as a shelf queen. So hopefully this helps you out.